All right, coming to you live from Austin, Texas, here at the University of Texas. We are here at DevOps Days Austin, and we're here with Patrick Debois. Patrick, how are you?
I'm good. Nice to have you back.
Well, no, the pleasure is mine. And?
I've got lots of pleasure. So, pleasure all around.
So now, I definitely remember meeting you at DevOps Days Austin. I don't know if it was the second or third one. How many of these here have you been to?
It's been the second in Austin. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. So you have something to do. You've got some familiarity with DevOps. Maybe you could talk to the people there, your familiarity. And I think one thing I thought your talk was really cool with the different bits that you talked about, sort of in the past, where it's going, and almost the what should I say, fragmentation or the decomposition of DevOps going forward. But interested in some of your thoughts.
So some of you might know I, by accident in 2009, started the word DevOps. And besides that, I have nothing to do with it, besides organizing conferences about DevOps days. But my talk was a lot about, looking back over 8 years of DevOps and kind of like, if I were to hand some information to the next hype that would bring like a cultural change, how, what mistakes did we make, and like how can we get better? And one of the things is that if we don't get better at dealing with the technical gravity that always pulls us back into less about the culture but more about the tools, I'm kind of sometimes skeptical about like will we ever get there on that level. So
yeah, it's sort of the shiny object today, as you talked about, was containers, and you're a big fan, right? It's going to solve DevOps, containers?
Well, I'm a big fan of containers. Obviously, we use it at work, and it's great technology, but it's, every time a new hype comes around on technology, I don't know, somehow we lose some cultural human aspect, and people are so focused. I know it's because it's so tangible, like technology is something, you can try and do, but sometimes it's weird that we just throw everything we learn overboard.
It's like the equivalent of what was that thing that the Three's Company lady used to sell, the ab thing? It's sort of like if you do these exercises, like you're gonna buy like some device. Yeah. The one I always see now is like it's a teeter-totter thing, and that's somehow gonna like make you look like a male or female supermodel if you're like spinning around, and it's sort of like, if you have the right approach, maybe if you have a set of weights, it will work out well. But like just having the set of weights like sitting there isn't doing nothing.
Yeah, you can see it didn't work for me.
Yeah. Well, this is one question I was thinking about this morning, and as all things, it just addresses my personal problems. Is like what, in your experience and also opinion, like what word should we use to describe doing all the new great stuff with IT, right? Like. So the problem, there's two phrases being at Pivotal that I encounter. One of them is people will say, in the most genuine good way, like, we are doing DevOps. And by that, what they mean is we have software developer, operations people, we're writing our own software and putting it out there and doing all this stuff, right? But I almost feel like I don't know, I kind of hesitate to think about the application, product management, product side of being, of it, that being all of DevOps and all-inclusive, right? I mean, there's a huge intersection, but there's something more, right? Like design, I don't know what it is. Now, the other phrase, this pure marketing, is like, I'll just say like this is the cloud-native approach, right? And what I always need to throw out is like, there's a bunch of better, more agile, design-centric ways to think about doing applications, right? And there's also all of this, not only the technology like we were just talking about, but this approach to how you run it in production and therefore how you design the software. And to me, that's a lot more of, I don't know what DevOps is. So anyways, as I'm fond of saying,
short story long.
I end all of my questions in periods. But like what should I use to describe that thing, right? Like, and I could be really snarky and be like, it's called writing software. But there needs to be some tag for like this bad way of doing it and this new way, and it can't really be agile anymore. Like maybe it can be, but I don't know. I don't really know what phrase to use for that.
I think you're right. Like the principal value of the word DevOps has been a label so that people could find like practices or things that people were doing
Right.
under that term. Like people have, like in one of the talks what mentioned, people were successful before DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
So and they collaborated, and all the ideas of Agile was there. But I think the intersection then with the cloud and all the other tools kind of brought things together. The different way of thinking about the problems, like, well, we can go down. It's about resilience, kind of all those perspectives. People matter.
Yeah.
So, well, I don't personally care if we continue using the term. Yes, I know I have like no stock options in DevOps, so it's very easy for me.
I wasn't aware there are options available.
Well, you as a company might have some,
Yes,
kind of like if you invest some money in there. But as long as it is, it's a good term. But looking forward on something new is coming on. I think it'll take some time to have a new cultural term.
Yeah.
But we'll have many technical floods coming up to us.
Yeah. No, and just we were just Barton and I were talking with this guy Diego earlier, and we were commenting on the idea that we're just at the beginning of like an upward curve of many large normal organizations understanding there's a new way to do IT. And so maybe the answer is that phrase will evolve as more and more people do it, and we'll have to just be on the hunt out for this phrase. So I'll have to keep doing the multi-sentence thing of what I'm about to talk about is all of this stuff, right? Because, to put it another way, I feel, and again, this isn't perfect, but it's kind of groping around in darkness. This problem that I have is I like the Google SRE framing of kind of what's going on of thinking about one way of thinking about what we call DevOps, which is your operations people spend I'm being very brief with it, they spend half of their time programming essentially, right? And then also the way it goes back to the dev part is your development people understand that their software needs to run in production, and therefore they change their behaviors all the way down to the coding level and all these things. Now, interestingly, those teams are separate, more or less, but it's kind of I'm more interested in there's these set of skills, and I think that set of practices is what DevOps is. And again, there's this other set of practices which is how do I make a nice UI? How do I make a nice workflow? And traditionally DevOps has very little to say about how do I focus on the usability of the software, and it's not really its concern.
Although there's been people for some time there was front-end ops kind of focusing on that stuff. But to my feeling is that SRE is focusing a little bit more on efficiency of technology.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so part of it is the collaboration, but I don't think in lots of the SRE that's
totally no, and that's the separation.
Yeah.
I'm by far not an SRE expert. I've just read the book or whatever. But you're right. The distinction is interesting. There is this separation, and their job is to make sure that if you follow their rules, your stuff runs, right? And then also essentially through policy to enforce you to have good behavior. So they're almost that's a terrible metaphor, but they're like the constables of running your stuff. And so it is a.
But what's interesting is that I was in Beijing DevOps Days a couple of weeks ago, and they positioned it as DevOps SRE now, and had a third term, and they put AI Ops.
Oh, nice.
Yes, and the idea is that the collaboration or the assistance doesn't just come from humans, but it also comes from your machines with more assistive, not like a chat up system, but they would hey, anomaly detection. What do you think? We can't monitor all the things, but they're kind of the Clippy that's starting to help us in a way. And I thought that was interesting that it's not a human-human collaboration, but a human-machine collaboration.
Yeah. So. There's always that notion of agents that you use to help you out, little Star Trek-y agents.
I think
would be nice.
Speaking of AI, I think we both just sat through Adrian Kokrop's talk. I thought one thing that was very interesting, he did sort of three of them. He said three different pieces, but the one that talked about monolithic apps to microservices to functions. And at the end, when somebody asked him sort of what's next, he talked about AI and machine learning. I was just curious on your take on that. When you sat there watching that, some of the thoughts you had.
Well, I'm a total newbie there on all of artificial intelligence, but even on a small scale, I can just see it happening. Like one of the apps we're building is like a video broadcasting interaction system, and just dealing with all the chat messages coming in, like we can't deal with it just by keywords.
Right.
It needs to be more assistive. So yeah, sometimes I'm torn away. Like, is this like the next marketing of Google kind of services? Because they try to differentiate on there, but there is obviously a use case of AI options and the learning. But
then the predecessor, the functions bit. I'll have to admit, that's the first time I heard the on beyond microservices and the concept of functions. Was that something that you worked with or familiar with?
Yeah, we're already like a year and a half working with serverless stuff, so it's not pretty new to us, but it's let's say it's interesting how it changes your operational model. But a lot of the things still have to do with like implementation details. There's parts of our workload that we can do in serverless. There's part that we can't because they're longer running jobs. One of the examples that we use it for is that so we have a very high peak load instantly if something happens on TV, and we're using a proxy that kind of first goes through containers as a stable like load that we know, and the overage we push through Lambda because the response times are still a little bit erratic on the serverless, but it really helps to overcome the scaling, which is 1 minute, 2 minute of a machine, which is just too slow.
So you're offloading some processing.
Yeah.
Bursting, as they used to call it.
Yeah.
In a slightly different context.
But like there's other problems like versioning. If you deploy a Lambda function and it's running, and when you're deploying a new version under peak load, it might still be running the older version because it's optimized in memory to keep like.
Oh right.
Yeah, so we'll have to manually exit the code. So, but
or you have to know to go force flush it out or whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So, but it's been really instrumental, and I would really advise people to work with it if you can. Our deploys try to be like they work in both systems, so and in Lambda and in containers, and we can just use the API gateway or load balancer to kind of like do the dispatching. So yeah, it's working for us.